heard there was an accident on 295 that may have delayed a couple board members, but Tim and Kim are on their way. I don't like my right hand. Welcome to the MSAD 51 Board of Directors meeting, Thursday, November 20th. Nice rainy evening.
March 20th.
What did I say?
November.
That's a good start. Dude, yeah. Wow, November. I'm ready for spring. Whew. All right. So tonight we are going to start with public comment. As I've mentioned, we do have a sign up. We have 2 sign-ups. The board welcomes and recognizes the value of public comment. To ensure public comment is fair and orderly, we will follow procedures outlined in our board policy, BEDH, and we ask that all members of the public do so as well. We follow this policy to help keep the meeting civil, respectful, and productive. We also hope that this allows for all community members who would like to speak to be heard. Residents and staff members will be given priority over non-residents within the allotted time frame. Our policy allows for 30 total minutes of public comment, although that can be modified at the discretion of the board. I will use the list to welcome speakers to the podium. We ask that the speakers use the designated podium when making their comments and speak into the microphone. Comments by individuals are limited to 3 minutes maximum. Clock should be visible on the screen. Thank you. It should be help everyone keep track of time. When the timer goes off, please wrap up your comments. Please state your name and town of residence before beginning your remarks. And as a reminder, public comment is not a time for discussion, Q&A, or debate between the board and speakers. Rather, it is a chance for members of the public to express their opinions on school and educational matters. The board will not comment on remarks made by the speakers during the public comment period. Please note that this does not mean we are not listening, and it does not express any agreement or disagreement with your statement. Lastly, please keep comments respectful and civil. We are neighbors here. Be kind. That also includes members of the audience. Please do not interrupt or respond to speakers' comments. We also ask that comments be addressed to myself, the chair. Please do not direct comments at or about individuals in our schools or communities. I do want to note that I will stop any comment that is contrary to these rules and that individuals who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave. Great. So I'm going to start with the list that I have here. The first on the list is Susan Inman, who's a staff member. +3.
Hi, I'm Susan Inman, the English Department Chair at Greeley High School. Thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate the immense task before you this evening. My colleagues and I are here on behalf of the GHS English Department, who recently learned that we are facing a 0.8 reduction in our department for the 25-26 school year. We're processing how this is going to impact student learning, especially among our college prep student body. These are the kids in the middle who are most vulnerable to slipping through the cracks, whose class sizes are going to increase by this change. We are also losing exceptional teacher expertise with this reduction. This is all deeply concerning to us. Enrollment at GHS is increasing next year, and it is our understanding that student numbers are only going to increase more in the years ahead. And so we want to understand the district's vision for addressing that and how this decision to reduce our staff affects that vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Sarah Staples.
Hello, I'm Sarah Staples from Cumberland. So I'm here tonight just to express, as a parent whose students have already graduated, I still live in this town, that I fully support increases that are necessary to support our educators. I was a former educator myself in Portland, and I think we don't do enough to support our educators who are really facing quite a bit of stress these days, both professionally, I think, and culturally in the classroom. I also really want to express my support for an inclusive education that protects the rights for self-determination for students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Sydney Gagne. Did I say that right?
I'm Sydney from North Yarmouth. Whoa. Okay. Imagine for a moment that one day your child has their face and name all over national news. Imagine the constant harassment and threats. Imagine the hate your child and your family will receive for years to come. Your presence here today is the result of your nightmare happening to another family, but clouded by hate, you fail to empathize with this child. In fact, you justify it. I ask you, when has harming a child, the very thing you claim to fight against, ever been justified? If the cognitive dissonance hasn't set in yet, I'd like to make it clear. You do not fight for children's safety, you want to erase a people. Instead of pushing for gender-neutral bathrooms, you'd rather they be more inaccessible for even biological women and men who may not look feminine or masculine enough. Instead of changing how team matchups are created, you'd rather bar trans people entirely. I remember growing up, politics used to be about finding a middle ground. Now you harass children. It's much easier to feel hate than empathy. The people who tell you to feel anger instead of reason are well versed in this, but they do not care about you or your children. They simply want to divide us. Thank you.
And I have one more paper. Just want to make sure that we have everyone on that list. Okay, great. All right, next I have Michael Perfetti.
It's a standoff,
Once
right?
Once you start.
Hello, my name is Mike Perfetti. I live in Cumberland. I said the last time I was here to be careful about claiming to follow the law. The law may become immoral, and then we will be faced with more difficult choices, as it is evident. I did not know it would be so soon. I want to add here that I believe we are now on dangerous ground with our government. If they will use this issue to force us into immoral choices, what is next? The idea that there are strictly two genders is in the middle of being debunked by science and good theology. The prayer of St. Francis has a line in it. It is better to understand than to be understood. So before we make judgments about what is and isn't, we should spend time learning to understand what is being asked of us. The science. I direct you to the podcast Embedded, Tested. Scientific discoveries in the last 50 years have expanded our notion beyond simple XX or XY chromosomes. These are simply not the only indicators of gender, sex, and identity. Our scientific understanding of it now includes so much more evidence if we're open to learning. the history. The concept of gender identity as fluid is also an ancient idea. Quote from a National Geographic article I read today: "There's ample evidence of gender variance throughout human history. Among the earliest are accounts of Gala and Gali, priests assigned male at birth who crossed gender boundaries in their worship of a variety of goddesses in ancient Sumer, Akkadian, Greece, and Rome. Other cultures acknowledged a third gender, including two-spirit people within indigenous communities and Hijra, I probably mispronounced that, I apologize, non-binary people who inhabit ritual roles in South Asia." Or, more recently, Albert Cashier, a brave soldier for the Union Army, born as Jenny Rogers. I quote this article. "First, though," says Gil Peterson, "historians and the public alike must turn their back on the idea that the existence of trans people is a recent phenomenon and learn how to find their stories. LGBT history is not physically hidden from us," she says. "It's hidden from our imagination about the past." And here's the math of it. If one does not want to accept these facts, the science and the history, and theology of ways of moving through the world, then perhaps statistics will help. In the last 10 years, transgender students in Maine, 50 transgender students in Maine have asked to participate in a sport. I don't know the total number of student athletes, but I suspect that over 10 years, this is an infinitesimal percent of the total. Also, before the NC2A shamefully bended their knee to the federal government, I'll wrap up. Charlie Baker, the head, reported fewer than 10 transgender athletes participated among 500,000 athletes. Additionally, it is estimated transgender people make up 2% or less of the total population. Transgender athletes are in no way displacing female athletes, statistically speaking.
Thank you.
I'm the father of 2 daughters. I'm going to leave the community with this one. One person's existence is not a threat to my existence. I speak now in favor of our current inclusive policy because I'm reminded of Martin Niemöller, a conservative German theologian who initially supported the Nazis but had a change of heart. And he coined the phrase, "First they came for."
So next on the list, I'm just going to continue with residents. Brian O'Connor.
You can start me at 1 minute. I'll do the other 2. I'm Brian O'Connor. I live in Cumberland. I have 2 children, one of whom goes to Greeley High, and the other of whom is here tonight. It's easy to be angry right now. Empathy is under attack. Community is under attack. I'm not here to tell you how angry I am. I'd rather use the privilege of public comment to share some gratitude. I'm grateful for Governor Mills and her willingness to stand up against tyranny. I'm grateful for the Maine Principals Association and their commitment to inclusion. I'm grateful for the school board and administrators who have stood behind inclusive policies. But mostly, I'm grateful for this generation of kids who keep showing up, being themselves, taking care of each other, while the adults behave badly and make them political pawns and pit them against each other. The present is scary. The future's not. Thank you.
Carrie Chinchat.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Chinquette. I live in Cumberland. I have 3 children in the school district. I'm here this evening to express my support for Superintendent Porter, our district, our students, and our community. I support MSAD 51 in following the Maine Human Rights Act. I want to emphasize that our community has done nothing wrong and has in fact followed the laws of our state and been a model of human decency. My hope is we will continue to stand united in this effort. I, like many of you, am eager for the attention and scrutiny to move past our district for the safety and well-being of all of our students and staff. I do not think putting students at the center of this debate is ethical. I believe our district has many other issues on which to focus. I hope this unnecessary overreach of the federal government will stop distracting and depleting our district. Thank you.
And then I have Hillary Lehman.
Hi, I practiced this beforehand, so I'm going to read it real fast now. My name's Hillary Lehman. I live in West Poland. I'm a retired educator here to speak in support of Greeley High School, the Maine Principals Association, and this school board for allowing equal opportunities for all athletes, as is the law of Title IX. The purpose of Title IX is to promote inclusion and prevent discrimination based on gender identity. Regardless of how the sitting president speaks about this law and the small fraction of people it actually affects, it does not change the fact that court and federal agencies recognize that Title IX's protections against sexual discrimination include gender identity, meaning that Greeley is not in violation of Title IX. They are, in fact, upholding that law. In addition, I think it's important to note that policies excluding transgender athletes are being challenged and overturned. I said at the start that I was a teacher, but once a teacher, always a teacher, right? Science, health, and biology, to be specific. So a brief lesson on what exactly is going on in a person who is transitioning. Like wearing an uncomfortable, ill-fitting, itchy sweater, many feel as though their body doesn't fit their mind. Some can get therapy to work through this body dysmorphia, like someone with anorexia or bigorexia, where they take steroids to bulk up so they don't feel too small. For a person that has decided they want to transition, they begin hormone therapy such as estrogen. This hormone will cause changes like feminine features, storing fat in different places, and it can halt testosterone-driven puberty, such as hair growth and a deeper voice. Fun fact, all humans have both estrogen and testosterone in their bodies. A transgender female who undergoes hormone therapy often has testosterone levels within the range of cisgender females. This means that they do not have a physical advantage over assigned female at birth people. On top of that, the physical and emotional challenges of gender dysphoria and transitioning can significantly offset any perceived benefits. But let's get real here. The main issue is about inclusion and fairness, and that has nothing to do with what barely 22% of this population perceives about transgender female athletes. Aside from being angry at the wrong 1%, the truth and actual legal precedent is that all athletes who want to compete in sports are protected by Title IX. This educational amendment is a federal law that says clearly, no person in the U.S. shall, on the basis of sex or gender, be excluded from participation in any education program or activity. Simply put, hating or being prejudiced against, transgender female athletes is merely the opinion of a loud, closed-minded person pushing their own biased beliefs. And that moral and ethical failing on their part does not make it acceptable, and it definitely does not make it the law. Even without the education department, this is still a federal law established in 1972. In conclusion, I want to say again that I support this school district, the MPA, and any school that continues to promote equal access and inclusion of all student athletes. Environments where all children have the opportunity to participate and thrive should be the norm. The principle behind Title IX was meant to prevent discrimination and promote inclusion. When children feel safe, supported, and loved, they have a fair chance at success. So thank you, Greeley High School and this school board. Thank you for giving every single student the ability to express themselves. I have no doubt you are creating future leaders of America who won't allow hate to defeat hope and progress. Thank you.
Sorry, bro. Thank you. So that was everyone on my list. So thank you for everyone who spoke. Thank you for public comment. And we are excited to move to the budget workshop.
Stay.
Come on.
It's back up again, I think.
That's good.
On-screen monitoring.
Budget really scares everyone away, huh? Right. Glad a few hearty souls are here. Okay. So now we are going to pivot to the school board budget workshop. I'm going to hand it over to Scott. Is that true? Okay.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
So the presentation tonight is basically a deeper dive into the budget than the presentation that was done by the superintendent, which was a more universal and higher looking look at the budget. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into it this evening. I've shared the presentation with everyone, so you should have a copy of that. So you should have that available. The budget has been reduced slightly from the last budget that we presented. The last budget was about 7.5%. We're now at about 7.23, and that has to do with the reductions of a custodial supervisor and the basically reallocation and reduction of some of our utility lines based on some assumptions. Now that we've had the modulars in place for some time, we can get a little bit more accuracy around that. So with that, what I'd like to do is go through the presentation. It has lines, page numbers, and amounts of the changes to the budget. And if you have the budget document in front of you, if you flip to the first page of the actual working budget, see this page, it says working budget, and it's behind the tax sheet. And what you'll find is that budget has, to the left-hand column, line numbers. There's page numbers at the bottom right. And I think if everybody can see that. That's how we're going to kind of follow the budget. And I'm not going to go through every single variance in the budget because we'll be here until 12 o'clock. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hit the highlights, which you'll find will follow the budget that Superintendent Porter had presented at the previous meeting. So we'll start with revenues. So our revenues are mostly from several sources. State subsidy is the largest part of our revenue other than our tax base. And also we have miscellaneous revenue and debt service from Chebeague Island. So if you'll see, our variance on the Chebeague Island debt service is about $80,000 decrease, and that has to do that this is the last year coming up, the fiscal 25-26 budget, in which Chebeague Island will be responsible for making a payment of their share of debt service from seceding from the district in the town of Cumberland. In miscellaneous revenue, we've increased that by about $197,000, and the reason for that is we're now gaining more interest revenue. We have use of facilities revenue and also Maine State billing revenue for some of the students that we bill for. State subsidy, we're receiving about $1.2 million more in state subsidy, and the allocations from that end up coming from our increased enrollment, which should come as no surprise to anyone. Okay, that's one of the parts of the funding formula. The other part of that is our special education allocation that we receive, and also transportation allocation. So those are the reasons for the increase in the state subsidy. Any questions on the revenues at all right now from the board? Okay. All right, major budget drivers across the multiple cost centers. That's really what we're going to be looking at this evening. But what I want to do is give a snapshot of the budget so that we understand that the budget, what it is mostly made up of. So if you look in FY25 and then in FY26, you'll find that the majority of our budget is made up of salaries and benefits. So salaries and benefits account for a little over $44 million of our budget. The increase just in salaries and benefits is about $3.1 million, which is a 6.3% increase on the budget of our 7.2 increase. So there isn't much difference there between what the budget is mostly made up, which is 82% of salaries and benefits, And if you look at a 7.2% increase and 6.3 of that is salaries, you can pretty much understand what the SAD budget is made up of. So if we look at expenditures, the district has to account for its expenditures in an 11 cost center format by state statute. And this slide, I won't go into it in depth, but this is the areas of which we have to organize the district's budget. These areas also appear at our district budget meeting and are actually voted on at our district budget meeting. So just a summary of the expenditures. Our budget is up $3.6 million or 7.2%. And these are all the cost centers and just the dollar amounts that are with there. Regular instruction is our largest cost center. Special education is the next largest, and then below that, they just fall into the different categories. So, reductions to the FY25 budget, and these were presented previously. You can see the basic reductions. Large one is the debt service, about $808,000 in debt service. We also have some decreases in reallocations in our staffing of about $294,000. Good evening. And this just gives kind of an outline of the decreases in the budget. So then we get into the various cost centers, and this is where we'll start to reference the actual budget document. Regular instruction, which is the very first cost center that we have. So if we take, let's just use, for example, MIW instructional supplies. If you turn to page 2 of your budget, okay. All right. On page 2, go to line 32, which is out on the left-hand column. Follow that down to line 32. Then go across the page, and you'll see that the MIW instructional supplies are up by about $151,000. And the reason for that is the literacy program that we're operating and looking into at Mabel I. Wilson School. You'll also find that below that, the books, which is line 33, right below that, is a reduction of $20,000. And the reason for that is that less books were needed due to the literacy supplies being, or the literacy materials being purchased. So that's one area of how to look at this. Another example would be if you looked at, let's take for instance, to the top of the page on the right-hand side, the educational technician, Greeley Middle School educational technician. That would be on page 24. So you could literally flip to 24. And you would see on page 24, again, if you followed it down to line 465, we have group health insurance, and also previously on the previous column of this, there's line, or page 24 and line 461 is the salary. You'll find that we've actually moved an educational technician over to the middle school from another cost center. So that's why you'll find that that particular piece is up and that particular area is up in the budget. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I start
Go
to
ahead.
ask questions?
You can ask any questions you want.
So the increase in the MIW instructional
Yes.
supplies, so is that a one-time increase? So it looks like, 2 years in a row, it was a little over $100,000, up $150,000. Now, is that the one-time purchase of supplies, and then the expectation is that it's coming back down?
I believe it's going to come back down.
So this is all related to the literacy pilot that K through 5 is involved in right now, the elementary literacy pilot. So we had teachers that were involved in 3 different pilots this year. So they bought supplies for those pilots. This is an anticipation that there will be a decision made, and these will be the supplies for the decision. Again, no decision's been made, hasn't been brought to the curriculum committee, but this is an anticipation of a consistent literacy program at the elementary level.
So a one-time like purchase of new supplies that will be used every year? Or
Yeah,
will-
you won't see this cost every year. There will
Okay.
be some replacement books that are
Right.
built into the literacy program, but this should be hopefully the bulk of it
But that's why it's so much higher this year,
Yes.
is that investment for a new
for the
program.
rest of the school that didn't pilot it.
Okay, thank you. And just one point, in the salary line, we were just on page 24.
Yes.
Are any of the salary lines, the percentage increase is a combination of both the raises and also if additional positions were added?
That would be correct.
Because, initially I was like 15%. I was like, I don't remember the increase being that much, but it combines the two.
There is, yeah.
Okay.
There's, and the salary increases, it depends on with the contract that we had. Some got larger raises, some got lower raises, but the net effect, what we negotiated, isn't 15%, okay, overall to the budget.
Thank you.
And that's actually, there's actually a position that's in there that's also transferred from another cost center. So you'll see high school is slightly down, middle school is slightly up. So the other place we could take a look at as well is Greeley High School books, which would be page 38. And again, we're still following through instruction. And I'm not hitting all of the areas, just catching the major areas that I can. And you look at line 753. And we're at Greeley High School, and you'll see that the book line is up $24,000. The $24,000 around the book line is for new math books, or the subscription for the new math books. The subscription expired, we had to renew the subscription. We had to pay for that, so this is for the new geometry, I believe, Jeff.
It is, it's
Okay.
geometry books, and these are the actual physical
Yep.
physical books. The license is expired.
Okay,
Can I ask a weird question on that?
go ahead.
The fact that we have technology and iPads and Chromebooks that have all this stuff, and we're still paying this amount of money for books. I'm sure that's like kind of the norm around, and not everyone wants everyone reading screens, and I know there's different learning styles. But it feels like that, again, that's so expensive to have to do all the time, any new changes, and the fact that we're still doing it. Is there any light in the future where those big, heavy books that get updated every once in a while and it costs that much money, anything that from a technology standpoint we can do to supplant the amount of money we put towards books?
I will say that we have drastically reduced
books,
book
yeah.
cost over the last several years.
Yeah.
This is one of those exceptions. It's math. And I actually think Sophia and Katie spoke to this at one point, but this was a decision the math department thought a lot about and felt that having a physical book for geometry was extremely important. And there's consumables that go with this as well, where students can actually do the work at home. So there's some math. I would say math is one of those exceptions.
I've seen your backpacks.
Yeah. I would say like geometry is the only class that I've had that we had to have like a single-use book, but the rest of our books we all reuse multiple times. But I think for geometry it is important because it's shapes and you have to draw. But
that program too is actually, it's like connected to a digital copy of the book, so they use it both ways. But where we would have, like, I know what you're talking about with like they're different books, but you can get all that same information online, and so you can print things out differently and use them too. But like Sophia said, with specifically geometry, you do need the physical copy, because if not, you'd be either printing it out sheet by sheet or having to retrace the diagrams that you're working with.
Okay.
But with every other book, like she said, we use them and then return them at the end of the year.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right. So that helps you go through the budget and you understand what the instruction cost center is. It's all those areas that have books, supplies, text that are directly related to the classroom, and staff salaries and benefits that are related to direct instruction. The next cost center would be special education. And this cost center has a increase in it for several areas. And so at 4.5, we had to add an instructional assistant, which would be an educational technician. So if you look at line 15, page 15, and you look at line 292 and follow that over, you'll see a $79,000 increase in that line. That's not the entire amount of the, all of that amount doesn't relate directly to the educational technician. An educational technician is less than that. It's probably, in the high 40s. This is 79. It also represents other salary increases as well. You'll also find that we have, on various areas of the budget, if we look at page 40 on line 801, this is where we're going to start getting into our out-of-district tuition. So if we look at page 40, and please stop me at any time if you have a question. So if we look at page 40 and you look at line 801, you'll see that there's about a $219,000 increase. That's for an out-of-district placement or a private tuition for a student in special education, several students. And then you'll also find that there's, in 4.5, there's $100,000, and then also in 6.8, which is the middle school, there's another $80,000. Totaling a bit over $400,000 for out-of-district tuition, which is the increases in that area.
Is that total higher than normal?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And is that based on like actual children who are currently enrolled that we know we need to place?
So it's a combination of children that are placed out right now.
Placed out right now, okay.
And are in the process of being placed out.
Mm-hmm.
So they're either been recommended for placed out, but we don't have a spot, there's not a spot for them yet.
Got it.
Or the IEP team is close to making a decision about that. And so we're anticipating that there'll be an out-of-district placement. So it's a combination of the two.
And it's higher than normal. And is this sort of like where we should assume that the number stays as our enrollment increases? Or do
Not
you think that this
necessarily.
is just sort of an interesting moment in time?
I think it's an interesting moment in time. I'm not sure if it's really tied to enrollment. The number has gone up and down over the years. It used to be this high at one point, and then we made a lot of efforts to keep our children in the district. We still do that, but there are occasions where the IEP team doesn't feel it's in the best interest of the student to keep them in the district.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
There's also some reductions in special education, which is, I won't take us to those lines, but in the middle school teacher salaries for special education, there's a position that is not going to be refilled. It's currently an opening, and we won't be filling that position. So, and that's that's easily a $100,000 position. What you're seeing on the list here is just the net of the reduction plus whatever increases in salaries and benefits we had. So to the right-hand side of this is the next cost center would be other instruction. And in other instruction, you have extracurricular, co-curricular activities and athletics. And what you'll find there is we have Greeley High School activity stipends, and it's an increase of about $13,000. There were a number of stipend reviews that we did this year that, based on the hours that staff were working, increased some stipends in the district, so this is a budget to actual. And it also pertains to a Kyle's Care stipend, which was added due to the popularity and the increasing student population into that activity. So that's where that amount comes from. Then we get into student and staff support, and this is one of our larger increase areas as far as just an independent cost center around. A lot of it has to do around technology. So if we, I'll choose, let's say for instance, Mabel I. Wilson School, and let's take a look at technology software, which would be page 10 in line 218. Everybody could go to that. So if you remember in Jeff's presentation, this was discussed that that the increase there, we talked about various technology areas. The increase in the technology software is about a little over $42,000. And the reason around that is the Meraki licenses that we have to do in the district now, and also the Centrex, thank you, the Crisis Alert Program. And then that's where the software lines have increased from. Also, we have hardware, and some of our hardware areas, if you were to take a look, is MIW, which is also page 10, line 219. There's a little over a $61,000 increase there. That has to do with the grade 2 Chromebooks, and also some access points, projectors, and replacements. And it's also a lease purchase. This is all lease purchase. There was a lease purchase that we did towards the end of last year, that the first payment is coming due in the new fiscal year for materials that were received last year, the devices from last year. Any questions on those? Student and staff support and technology.
Can you remind me what PLG is?
Professional Learning Grant.
Okay.
And the reason those are reduced, when you take a look at it, is we had, that's been something that's been budgeted for a period of time. We now have in the collective bargaining agreement a day which is self-directed professional development. So we'll be looking at putting less money into the budget for the PLG grants, which staff can apply for.
For that technology, software, and hardware, I
Yes.
think I recall, so this again, a lot of this is one time, we need to buy new licenses. This isn't going to be ongoing.
That's correct.
That's right.
But it'll be cyclical. We'll have to re-up that license again at some
We'll
point.
have to re-up at some point. And then if we do end up getting anything from E-rate, it will help us in the long run when we apply for E-rate. Okay.
But the licenses, are they an annual license cost?
They're an annual license
Okay,
cost.
so
Yeah.
we'll see that amount. Yeah.
But we're hoping that we can get E-rate, which will allow us to buy 3 years and not have to buy just 1 year. We just don't know what's going to happen with that in our application process.
Yeah, when we put the network in, the network was paid for by federal funds through the state back during the COVID period when we had a lot of federal monies for things like that. So we got our network, fiber network was replaced. One of the things that we did not opt to do at that time is take on the Meraki, or take on the licensing for that. And we did not replace the core switches. There wasn't enough money to do all of that. So we knew that those things were going to catch up with us. They have. Both those things have caught up with us. Our switches are aging. The licenses, I believe, were a 6-year license, if I remember correctly, and now we have to go ahead and renew those.
You'll see if I just went to the next page under this cost center, student and staff support, you'll see that that's one of the things that shows up. Greeley Middle School technology hardware and the high school technology hardware. That's where you see the switches and things that are needed for the district, along with projectors and access points.
So it's a combination of things that
Yes.
will be paid for that won't continue.
That's correct.
The
And there'll
switch
be,
is a one-time.
yeah,
and
and it would be much more than that. We're lease purchasing these items over a 3-year period.
Okay, so we'll see the same dollar amount for the next 3 years for those?
No, it'll be this payment, but once it's in the budget, it doesn't force an increase in the next year. So it won't be like this increase plus another 73 plus another 73.
But you're right, it's in the budget.
It's in the budget.
It's in the budget. So
It's not like we buy the books and then we don't need to buy the books
it just
again.
doesn't
Yeah,
show
that's
as
right,
an
yeah.
increase.
Okay.
But
And
it
the
shows
other
an
thing, I
increase,
just
yeah.
wanted for full disclosure, we are replacing the very worst and most important switches in our network. So there are switches that still have to be replaced, but we're taking care of the worst ones, the ones that we think could fail.
And the whole intent around the lease purchase is to expense the items as we use them before we need to replace them again. So if you enter into a lease purchase, which is a 3-year or a 5-year, you're paying for those things over the period of years that you would utilize them. And then when that lease goes off to drop off again, then you start looking at replacing again. And so you try to get into this cycle, whereas one lease is retiring, you're bringing on another one, so your budget stays flat.
These technology upgrades, just for clarification, in my world, I would say, is it doesn't sound exciting to update a wireless access point or a switch, but from like cybersecurity and all that we talked about last week, it's a must. And it's not like the coolest thing or why are we spending it all this often, but it's a real security issue because you can't update certain things, certain software doesn't work on it, and so I think it's definitely a priority.
Things come to a screeching halt when the network goes down.
Yeah. So,
Yes,
but it's not the most exciting.
Even phone systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we learned in the board meeting a few months
Yes.
back, right?
Can you remind me how long Centegix will be a line item? And do we know how much it will change after, like, an upfront cost?
So originally, the setup costs all had to be put into year one and I believe, I have to go back and look, I think it is a 5-year lease.
Okay.
So that will definitely drop.
Yeah.
But what we did is flattened it over the years and put the setup in each year.
Okay.
And then the actual cost for licensing each school, I think, is going to be, going down. But I can double check that for
Okay.
you. I don't have an answer that's complete
Thanks.
at this moment.
All right, if we're all set with that area, the next cost center would be system administration. And in the contract services line, which would be, we want to look at page 52, line 1042. Hard to believe there's over 1,000 account lines in here, so. Okay, so if you go to page 52. Again, now you're in system administration. And if we take a look at this, it's down at the bottom of the page and it's line 1042. You'll see that we have a $24,000 reduction here, and this is our equity consultant that we've reduced as a contract service. Our legal line, which is on line 1043, which is on the next page, 53, that's a budget to actual. You can see from, if you go all the way to the left, you'll see in fiscal year 23-24, we spent almost $238,000 in legal. This year, we're trending higher than what we budgeted, and so we're trying to bring it budget to actual by adding another $50,000 to the legal line.
I got a question about legal services.
Yes.
Do you know how we compare to other schools around us in terms of the money we spend on legal services?
We can definitely get that information. I'm not sure how we compare to other districts.
Yeah.
Of our size.
Yeah, specifically like for the policy committee, I know we have legal review our policies and is that standard practice that like they get to bill us every time we want to make a change on a policy, or do some school districts just change their policies and use sort of model MSM model policies and just forego the check?
Yeah, some districts just use MSMA sample policies. They're not, MSMA sample policies are good, but they're not always updated or current, or there's nothing available. So that's why we do check MSMA first. That's our first go-to.
And then in terms of contracts, like I know they're looking at the contract for the turf field, where if we'd gone with a co-op, we would have foregone that cost, which seems like a conflict of interest that they told us we couldn't go with a co-op so that they can now charge us to review it. I'm wondering, do you know what other potential, do they review any contract? Is it only above a certain dollar amount? I'm just wondering, how often are they charging us to look at these things when we might be able to forego that cost if we could go with a pre-negotiated co-op something? Or is it just very large contracts, or are they reviewing like the Bobcat or sort of any contract we sign?
I do not have them review like the Bobcat
Okay.
and things of that nature. It's more your larger contracts.
Okay, so-
anything that would have to do with building construction, certainly. Okay.
Which seems like you would want them to, but
Yeah,
again,
absolutely on
if we
that,
could go with a co-op
I
or
mean, if we
any
have
other
to
school district that's listening.
Yeah, if we have to sign a contract for bus transportation to Boston, that wouldn't be something we'd send to Drummond Woods
Okay.
either. We'd just take care of that.
Yeah,
in-house.
it'd just be interesting to
It's
know
the
if we're-
exposure level, right? You take
Yeah.
a look at what's your gross exposure level.
Yeah, because it's a lot of money. So I'm just wondering, are we higher than other school districts? Is this just a cost of doing business and having to make sure we're covered?
Yeah, a lot of it is the One Campus project. We've had so much legal activity around that project, and there have been so many legal things we've had to check into just around that.
Things
We're
in
talking about
special
a
education.
$53.5 million project. Special education, collective bargaining, definitely you have to, we had legal counsel with, working with us on that. Actions brought against the district that's risen in the last couple of years, 3 years, 4 years. So definitely, those are all expenses we have to incur.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because you're right, on the policy committee, we throw it out being like, yeah, just send it to Drummond and Woodson all the time. And I do wonder if you're like, oh God, like, do we have like a package deal at all with them being like this many hours, or is it every single time we send a document to them, it's an hourly rate? And
It is
like,
an hourly rate.
so there's no like, that's how it works. Okay.
It's yeah, they bill it an hour, and we are, you know, when a policy is done and ready to be reviewed, that's pretty much when we have them review it.
Yeah.
If there's no changes to a policy, we don't have them review it. And I know it sounds expensive, but it also
It's a necessary evil, like
it
that's
probably
but-
saves us tenfold in having it reviewed beforehand, because you don't want a policy that's faulty. But it, you know, it is an expense that we have to incur when we have those.
Okay.
For sure, but it is hourly. We do get discounts when we've reached the threshhold. We've been given a reduction.
A punch card?
Yeah.
You know?
I feel like
Given that before.
Like with your trash bags, you get a punch card,
Right?
So it's
Exactly.
not-
Like
There's also
subs.
when they do things for multiple districts as well. So like if they've already done one particular thing for another district, I've seen discounts for that as well.
we don't even get a fruit basket. Like I feel like we're, you know,
Not even a card.
Nothing.
You get one free seminar a year.
But okay.
All right.
Do they put it on? Do we get to choose our seminar?
No, it's for superintendents only. So
Oh, so you
I get to
get.
yes.
What worries me is that could be a tactic by a variety of different parties because they know we're costing. They know how much we have assigned to legal fees. They know that we're doing this build, and so it worries me. And if we're facing what we're facing, you know, this year we had a bunch of negotiations. Like we have the new build coming up. We're facing what we are in from like the federal government side of things. Like that, I feel like is a risk for us. Like we know how much we have to spend in that amount and how much we don't have to spend. And so that, I don't know how we kind of avoid that risk, but I'm worried about just that amount of money being out there.
Well, as a follow-up, like from a policy committee perspective, right? Is it like an up to amount? Like, oh, we've reached the number of legal reviews this year for a
Right.
policy committee. I guess
I will say that we overrun our legal account, and this is showing, this amount is basically what the actual is for the year.
Yeah.
And we've been increasing every year for years and years. And I think some of it is just the cost of legal has gone up. But I also will say that since COVID, there's been a lot of actions taken.
A lot of
Yeah.
litigation.
I mean, are you worried about?
I'm very
This
worried
line?
about that it takes away from other things in our district.
Yeah.
We have
Okay.
to
I mean, I think that's
facing these actions all the time, and it would be nice to.
it's not good for our students and our
We're
community.
not the only
and so-
district seeing this. There's a lot of school districts that are facing lots of actions, and it is a huge area of concern that we're doing this.
well, and that's only captured in legal fees. I think the other point that I want to make is the cost of administrators' time.
Administration, too.
That's not captured there, right?
Administrators are investigating, lots of investigations, and I'd say the investigations have probably, if I had to guess, have doubled in the last 3 to 4 years for administrators.
And
That's
what is that taking
administrators'
away
time.
from?
Right.
They're taking away from culture building, being in the classroom,
Working
being
with students.
other things like that.
Leadership in the building.
Jeff, do we get a report from Drummond at the end of the year, like a bank report, where it's like we spent this many hours on policy, this much on litigation, this much on buildings? I mean, because I
Asked
think
for that before.
yeah, that'd be super helpful just to know, like,
Where's our money?
because some of it like
Yep.
is just costs we got to eat, and some of it, if it's like if they're reviewing our policies, maybe as a policy committee, we're like, we
Yeah.
will not send things to Drummond unless we think it is ready to go,
Agree.
right? Like, just to sort of know, like litigation, we need them to defend us, but
And
just to have awareness of sort of how that money's getting broken down, I
I
think
have
would
to
be
say
useful.
that's probably the smallest cost.
Policy
that
is
we
probably
have.
the smallest cost.
Yeah, but that's something that we could directly help with. 'Cause
Right.
we're often
within,
just like,
within the control
yeah,
of
like
the board, right?
you can tell us, no, wait until you have all your revisions before we send back to them, because we want to be thoughtful about that too.
Or if we're okay with
Yes.
MSMAs.
Yeah, maybe the
and
model policy is
if-
fine.
Yes. And I'm interested also in the collective of other school districts, if there's a number of districts that are making the same change. Can you
Just
save
during
money?
this particular time,
So
especially
maybe
when
that
things are tight.
1% of that can be saved.
Well, I will say we've used MSMA as a starting place way more in the last couple of years. And one of the reasons for that, Drummond Woodson used to have a staffer who her only job was policy, Ann Chapman, but she retired. And so she wasn't an attorney, so she didn't bill at the attorney rate. She billed at a staffer rate. She was very thorough, very good, and Drummond Woodson hasn't replaced that position. So now we have attorneys doing that work. And so they're obviously billing at a different rate than when Ann was there. She was there for a long time.
So last question, and Tim mentioned this, and I just wanted to better understand the costs of when attorney rates are covered by insurance versus
So
the
they're
budget.
covered by insurance if there is a legal action that has been taking place, where we're going to court, or there's usually it has to actually go to court in order for us to be able to recover those fees. So if there's a judgment against the district, or we're in court, and often the court will say, you can recover those fees, and then it would run through insurance. Anything else?
No, just that there's a deductible to that. They don't pay the 100% cost, so there is a deductible to that through our insurance. So.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Great. So, okay.
I think it's an important point that was raised, and can't say don't sue us, but when you live here, you work here, be careful what you ask for, because it takes money away from the students.
Exactly.
I have a crazy question. Have we ever thought about a different attorney or a different group?
There are about 10%, 15% of the districts use another firm or other firms in Maine besides Drummond Woodson. 85, 90% use Drummond and Woodson because they're diversified. And they do more than just schools. They do everything, real estate, everything.
And they have specialists in the various areas.
But the school one they have specialists in, finance, just students,
Special education.
personnel, special education. So that's why I think most districts feel comfortable using them.
Do we sometimes use other attorneys?
We do if there's a conflict of interest, and we do right now. We're using another firm for a case that we have. Yep.
Okay, before I move off this one.
Hold on.
So I was digging through some stuff. I'm not saying these are accurate numbers, but it looks like we're not too far off from Yarmouth and Falmouth and Wyndham, to be honest, looking through their budgets from last year.
I'm guessing we're fairly
Doesn't make me
close.
feel better, but
Good job.
makes me feel less bad.
Thank you, Google.
Not as bad?
Less bad, less bad.
Just their budgets align differently. So we have one legal line. They have like 17 on one of them, I think 6 on another. So I don't know which they fall under or how they add up. But
Rough math.
It's similar.
Oh, it's I would say, and I know some of the issues they're dealing with too. So it doesn't surprise me when you said that. I think school legal costs are just up in the last 5 years. I have never seen so many actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We go back for a minute. So the next cost center would be school administration. Nothing really much in this area other than there's a large reduction in Greeley Middle School tuition in the office of the principal. We had several staff members who were working towards degree levels and one towards a doctorate. So that's no longer being done. So we're able to do a budget to actual adjustment on that and reduce that money. So
Did they graduate?
yes.
Awesome. Congratulations.
So transportation and buses. So let's talk about a couple areas on this. If we look at page 57 and we go to line 1,135 in the budget. One of the areas under safety and security in the district has to do with cameras in the schools and also cameras on the buses. And so this particular line under contracted services is up $24,000. And the reason for that is that we now have cameras on all of our buses where they can be looked at live at any given time, and that the administrators also can have access to them to see what is going on in the buses and so forth. So it's addresses a serious shortfall in security and safety that we had on our buses. So, and that's really more for the service. There has to be like a network service rather than just the cameras themselves. So there's also under technology software, I won't take you to the line, but there's also a parent app that we've have in place now. It's called Parent App GeoFinder, and it'll allow parents to download the app pertaining to their students, and they'll be able to log on to and see where is their student's bus at any given point in time. It's also a great security issue, and it also helps with parents will be able to set a circumference when the bus is 5 minutes away from the house, a mile away from the house, 2 miles away from the house. They'll know where the bus is if it's running late. We can also send messages out to let people know if the bus is running late and go to just that bus. So that's a $4,800 increase for that app. Many districts have added that app. So it's
so that's an annual fee?
That particular one there would be an annual fee, yes. Yeah, it would be a software fee. And then we also have a van purchase, which is on line, page 57 as well, and line 1149, and that is a lease purchase on a new van. We now need to get into a replacement schedule on the vans that we have. We purchased those over a period of time. We actually had to even use federal funds for some of those vans initially, and then they're used quite often by special education, transportation of homeless students, and actually they go to the mountain from time to time. The vans have really helped us out rather than having to run a bus. And also not having to have a bus driver with a license. We don't have to have 5 more bus drivers because a van driver can be.
Do you know what who the vendor is for the vans?
At this point, I don't. We haven't put out an option on this one yet, or put out a bid on it.
Okay.
I know what you're asking me.
We know what you're doing.
and I know where I'm heading.
We should just double check. See if we can save some time and money.
Can we check with the other attorney?
Yeah.
We can use the co-op?
We have pushed, one of the things that I wanted to mention is on the loader, we did get the co-op price on the loader. Okay, so.
Let's talk about it.
So I wanted to let you know. We talked to the vendor, and the price was close to being there as it was, but we were able to push a little harder and get a better price. So we were able to get that, and I'm sure that if we're eligible for other things through the co-op, we'll look at them. Okay.
Yeah,
And it's actually a good bargaining tool.
Oh, that's true.
Because even though we may not be eligible for some things, we can push on the vendor and say, look, on the co-op, it's this price, and we've used that, so.
Can I ask another question, just for clarifying? So, again, we're in a very tight budget season. We're about to incur a big expense next year, and moving forward, we're not sure what's happening with, tariffs and stuff like that, and expenses. We're kind of a lot of questions around this time. So even in my own home, I would like to get a new car since we're adding another kid, but I don't know if that's possible at this point. And so if we look at things like van purchase, what is our definition of, I would want to see this budget and look at it and be like, this is a must-have. We can't send a van, by the way, to the mountains because it's going to break down reliability, safety. So in other years where it's I think we should be on top of it. It's an open year where we can do this. This year, I feel like the lens should be, no, it's a safety issue. We have to do it. We'd be derelict in our duty not to. Is that the lens that you're approaching?
That's the lens
most
on
of the
this
stuff,
one. It's a
not
safety
just
issue.
Okay.
This is one of the vans that's starting to rust.
Okay.
A lot.
Okay.
So, and we need to replace it.
You're a car guy. I trust that. I just want to make sure if we look at this, You know, I don't want to look at every item and be like, is that a must-have?
No,
Is that a
it is,
must-have? Is that a must-have?
and we have not been on a replacement schedule for the bands, and we've got a number of them, and we need to get into a cycle of
Can't you
replacement.
fix it for cheap?
I could.
Isn't that what you do? Okay, cool.
Conflict.
Tim, are you in the market for a used van?
Yeah, do you have a van that could fit 4 kids?
And there are also these bands as well. Some of them have wheelchair lifts in them as well. So that's the other part. And when the wheelchair lifts start not to work and so forth, and we have more problems, then we have to replace
I
them.
think I'll be in one of those soon, so that van might be perfect.
They actually have become very popular to use in the district. So
I have a question that's not specific, it's more general, but like what's our line on putting it into the budget versus having like the geometry books paid for by the geometry student family, or you know the GeoFinder app, having that be
a question,
you know, paid for by the person who chooses to use it. Like,
well, I think the books would fall under free and appropriate public education. Yeah. Okay, we wouldn't be able to charge for those. The app, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that one a little bit.
And I don't know how that would work with accessibility and licensing and things like that. It may not be an option, but as Tim said, anywhere we can.
Sure.
So we have more it's a great question because it gets asked sometimes. We have more flexibility in charging parents for after-school activities, and the courts have made that very clear, than we do for co-curricular and extracurricular. But we don't have as many options during the school day, so for books and stuff like that. Field trips we can, because it's considered a co-curricular experience. So you can charge parents for things like that. But when it comes down to kind of the basic supplies, we all know that teachers spend money on basic supplies beyond what they get for budget. As much as we don't want them to, they do because they have to. Sometimes parents will donate stuff for the classroom. We know that what we have in the budget doesn't cover everything. But in terms of just uniformly charging parents, it's generally kind of a no-no to.
In the app that you're talking about, our interest is having as many parents have that as possible, because it helps us, allows us to communicate with parents, and adds to the safety of students riding. So it's less of a convenience item, is more of a safety item. So we don't have students getting dropped off at a house that's empty. Parents will know where the student is, and they can get to the house and make sure they're there. So, so those are some of the things that we look at with this. All right, so then our next cost center would be facilities, and we've done a number of adjustments to our energy lines across this budget to actuals, and the MIW water and sewer, which is page 12 in line 243. One of the things that we found is that we were trying to get our arms around the water and sewer once we put in the modulars, and the other part is that the water company was out and just replaced the meter lately. I'm not so sure that our meter was working properly. And so they were out here to fix the meter. So we've done a projection based on our recent billings, and we've also done projections since we've had the modulars in place. And we feel that it's about a $23,000 increase to our water and sewer line at Mabel I. Wilson School. Personally, I think we've been underbilled on it, and now we're being billed appropriately. There's also other areas across the budget would have to do to modulars. So if you look at, for instance, the Greeley Middle School, and you look at the line 700 on page 35, this is an area where we're having to add another modular. And so, yeah, page 35. And we've had some discussions about the modular in finance and at the board meeting. And the cost of the lease on the modular is approximately $150,000, and then there's also one-time setup costs that are included to that bring it over just over $180,000 increase in next year's budget. And that has to. We have 3 modular buildings, which are less than optimal right now. We've had some issues with air quality. We've had some issues with the buildings themselves because they're older buildings and they don't have the parts available to repair the air handling units to the buildings that we're actually leasing right now. They actually have to go find another one and steal parts off it to replace ours. So due to that, we're looking to replace the 3 that are already there, and then also add a 2-classroom modular for our student increased enrollment at Greeley Middle School. So that's what that increase is for. And so I don't know if there's any questions on that piece, but that's one of the larger increases. All right, we can then look at one of the areas of cost center, which is our principal and interest payments on debt service. And if you look at page 59, lines 1175 and 1176, you'll find that there was principal and interest over $800,000 reduction in our debt service, which has to do with the bond on Greeley Middle School retiring next year. Or this year, excuse me, and no payment next year on that. So that would be the cost centers. Any questions that you want me to go back to on the cost centers at this point? Because I was going to go into the tax assessment. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
So we do get some money back on square footage for the modulars, correct?
We do. And I think it's almost $300,000. Let me just.
Okay. And so with the increase in square footage,
Yes.
we'll
Yes,
get
we
additional.
have to apply to the state for that, and it basically, you can get it for up to 5 years.
Okay.
And it's based on square footage, and, excuse me one moment here, I can tell you exactly what it is.
You found that pretty quickly.
I don't know, I haven't found it yet.
Okay.
Okay, here it is. So it's $289,280 that we're
Okay.
getting back right now on the square footage of the
And
modulars.
when will the 5 years be up?
Let's see, we just did a 3-year renewal, 2 more years, I believe.
So
And
through-
they're gonna cycle off because we didn't, the ones at MIW will mature,
Okay.
and we'll lose that first, and then we went on to put the ones at the middle school as well. So there's a little bit of a lag there. I think there's a year's lag between the 2 of them.
Okay, but we should be able to continue to get funds through when the
Through
new.
till we get the building project, I hope.
Okay.
Can I ask the finance committee a quick question? Is there anything, before we move on to the fun taxes part of it, is there anything that you're surprised that we haven't asked questions on, or anything you think we should be paying attention to or highlight for us? Because it's a big document. We're jumping around very organized in a way. Anything that we should be looking at that just to be aware of?
I want to give these guys a chance.
One thing I will say is our last budget committee, subcommittee meeting, I think the 3 of us went through every single line and asked a question about at least 2 or 3 things a page. So just to give you an idea of how in depth we dove and how many questions, and sometimes I feel painful to try to take away from teachers, but at the same time, just being responsible and digging into it.
Yeah. Anything you want to share though that we missed or should know about? That's all I just want to open.
I think a lot of what Scott's presentation kind of reflects is what we asked for the most part. I think he's covering kind of what we asked, and plus obviously what effort and energy, the significant effort and energy that he put into it beforehand.
Well, giving you another minute to maybe think about that, a couple things that I had on my list from last time that I will go ahead and ask are the bus sonar, is that the GEO, the GEO app?
No,
Or
the
is that
Zonar is a GPS unit. That's part of it, and that was an add-on to the Zonar. The Zonar is used to check the vehicle. The drivers have a handheld unit, and it forces them to go to areas on the bus to where there's buttons, so they have to do their pre-trip and their post-trip inspections. So the Zonar, this is an add-on to the Zonar. The app that we talked about here is an add-on to Zonar, and it uses the GPS system.
Okay, and sonar is also in the budget, or it's already?
Zonar is in the budget. Zonar is in the budget. We bought the units, and we bought the units out of our parts and supplies. So that covers it, and the rest of our contract services covers that. And it's great. The Zonar handheld units are great because the drivers literally at the end of their run or the beginning, like at the end of the run, at the end of the day, they have to do a post-trip inspection, and they literally have to walk back to the back of the bus with a handheld unit, get it close to the tab that's at the back of the bus, and then we know that the bus has been checked on a daily basis. So that's part of the Zonar system for the pre-trip and the post-trip inspections. And then it also notes any deficiencies in the bus so that mechanics will know what they need to fix. The drivers can put in notes when they do their inspections. It also pertains to the routing software that we have. We have a routing software that's also tied into the Zonar, which allows us to look at how efficient we can be with the bus runs, timing of the bus runs. We also know where every bus is, and we can check. A lot of times we'll get a phone call. The big yellow bus went speeding by my house today. I go and I take a look at the GPS unit, and I can tell that the bus was doing 25, and somebody's telling me it was doing 60. All right, so and, they look big and they go fast. People think they go fast, but we've had times like that where we've been able to look at things and either validate them or not validate them.
Thank you. Also, so the budget experience, the health insurance experience rating. I just had a note that it seemed like it was higher this year, and I was curious as to what was impacting that.
Yep. I've budgeted 10% for health insurance increase. I don't know if that's going to be enough based on what our experience rating is. The experience rating is claims paid to claims collected. That's really what the experience rating is. Year to year, it can be multiple different things with the experience rating.
But there wasn't anything specific, it sounds like, that
no, I mean, it's,
went into that calculation this year.
Could be surgeries, could be, a number of different things, higher usage.
But a similar calculation to previous years.
And also my understanding is that the Benefits Trust has had the ability to buy down rates over a period of years. They no longer have that same amount of money and available to buy down the rates. So, and to apply to those rates.
And then I guess the other thing, if we can just talk a little bit about the staffing adjustments. I know that those obviously came up this evening, but also were presented in some information that we received in terms of that, being able to reduce the 3 FTE down to 2.8, and I know I also learned more recently, I guess, about the change in the leadership department head structure at the high school, which I'm not sure if everyone is aware of in terms of the stipends and how that, maybe if everyone can just understand how that all fits together.
Yeah, so one of the things that is part of those, it's really, a lot of it is just adjustment. So we have adjusted staffing in order to move staff from one place to the other. And so in the presentation, you'll recall that I said there's a 3.0 FTE reduction. So we also have 2 new vacancies at the middle school 6-8, which is for enrollment. We have just increased enrollment. We need those 2 teachers. Instead of looking at those 2 teachers as 2 teaching positions at the middle school, as we've got to go out and hire 2 new people to do that and add those 2 positions to the budget, we made efforts to look at our staffing within the district. And one place that we found was at the high school, which is the leadership team model. Right now, 6 teachers have 1 block that they are released on their teaching rotation, where they are meeting as a leadership team and doing department head duties. So they're released from a block. So this budget proposal removes that model from the budget, and those 6 teachers would go into the classroom instead of using that release time as leadership team time. In exchange, they would be paid stipends like all of our other schools are for leadership team work, because that work will have to happen after hours or after school or whatnot. So we're transferring we were able to reclaim an FTE at the high school that we're transferring from the high school to the middle school to fill one of those 2 vacant positions. And so you did hear some teachers tonight advocating there is a teacher that is transferring from the high school to the middle school. We left it to the high school to look at their whole schedule, try to figure out where that FTE will come from. They looked at a whole variety of things, including their labs and who is staffing those labs, how many staff are staffing the labs, how many blocks per day, et cetera. And that's how they came up with the FTE. They also looked at class sizes. So that was how we determined that situation. So we're able to fill one of those positions with a transfer from high school to middle school. And we feel comfortable with the numbers that we've looked at, that we can do that, fairly reasonably. And then at the middle school, and again, we have some staff that have not been informed. So we're still working through some staffing, so I can't give a lot of more detail. But we are reorganizing services at the middle school in one of the areas, special education areas. And as a result of that, we're able to reduce the teaching positions at the middle school in particular. One of the positions is vacant right now, so we don't have anybody in the position. So we're just eliminating that position through a reorganization of services that we've looked at caseloads of students, and we're able to do that fairly reasonably without an issue. So that's where some of those expenses are. We're also looking at an ed tech reduction in a regular education technician. Again, we have informed staff. It's going to be through attrition because we have an opening for an ELL position in the district, which is a new position, which we need. So that was a wash. We're able to eliminate one, and then we have in addition of a need in a different place. So it's really, again, we're looking at transfers and moving staff around. So you'll see some areas are eliminated, and then in some areas we needed more staff. So overall, we're looking at those staff adjustments. Overall, it's a reduction in staffing.
It's commonplace to move staff around based on enrollments and reassign, and especially when in the special education area specifically, and also in other areas of the budget. So that's not an uncommon thing for the district to do.
Can I piggyback on Annika's question specifically about the science teachers? A few meetings ago, high school science teachers came and spoke about the elimination of, I think, one FTE in that department, and it doesn't sound like that's being reversed. But it is a little confusing when our enrollment numbers are going up, but we're hearing about positions being eliminated. I hear what you're saying, that there's some sort of shuffling of resources, but can you speak to that?
Yeah, so our high school, we have about 615 students right now at Greeley High School, and we offer everything. That we know that. We're a very comprehensive high school. So we offer AP, we offer IB, we offer CP, we offer electives, we offer comprehensive special education, comprehensive alternative education. So we offer A to Z. The school has made a lot of efforts, and we've added staffing previous to the last couple of years in order to support more electives at the high school and support programming. So we've consistently added. This is the school right now that is not growing. There is going to be some growth in enrollment next year, but the growth still has not come into the high school. It won't be in the high school for another 3 years. And so that growth we're going to have to respond to just like we are 6-8. We've done, for the last 2 budget cycles, we have done an enrollment study and a class size study and a program study of all of our schools, but particularly at the high school, because we knew that we've looked at some of the class sizes and they're lower than we would expect or have been the case in previous years. We've also looked at the lab model at the high school. It's a great model, but we have a lot of blocks where we have multiple staff members staffing those labs. It's expensive. We looked at the ILT model at the high school. We're the only high school in this area that has that model, where we release teachers for an entire block of, that's an 86-minute block that we're releasing. It's a great model. I was supportive of it when we put it in years ago, but it also it's expensive, and we need to reassign teachers back to the classroom. We just can't afford it in years like this. And we haven't had a budget increase of, you know, we've had 2 budget increases, about 7% or a little over 7% in the last couple of years. We can't keep operating that way without making some reductions in our budget. And right now, the elementary and the middle school have been really hard hit. We've been adding. The high school has not added with enrollment. We've added a few students here and there. But when you look at the class sizes, you know, across the board, we're dealing with class sizes at 6, 7, 8 right now. They're 20, 21, 23, 24. In some cases, Allied Arts might even have 25. You look at the high school classes, we're well below that. So there is an ability to do that. Now, at some point, the high school is going to add a lot of students. That's coming. And we know we're going to have to be prepared to add staff at that time and move staff around. But we're in a period with the high school where the high school enrollment has not gone up much. And it's pretty much stayed flat for a while. So we looked at all of our class sizes. We looked at what we're offering. We're offering a lot, and we'll continue offering a lot, even with these reductions. But it's hard to justify when we have a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade class that's got, you know, well over 20, 21, 22, 23 students in many, many cases. And we have high school classes that have 15 students or less. Now, again, we run a comprehensive high school. We have IB, AP, we're committed to doing that. When you do things like that, and you have these programs, you have to be willing to offer classes that have 10 students in them. Because otherwise students don't get those courses, and you just have to do that. We know that. But we also know that there's other areas that we looked at, and we were very careful in looking at those, where we could make some reductions, and we have made reductions in the last 2 years. In order, you know, in a different budget season, we might not have gone that deep, but we've had to. Just, that's where we're at.
But these aren't reductions, it's a reassignment.
Most of it is a reassignment. Like, we have a need, for example, like right. And I say reductions, but it's reductions at one place, and it's a reassignment to another place where there's another need.
So
like
we don't
6,
have
8.
to hire, right? This is so we do not have to hire.
That's another way of saying it. So we're moving staff around. But
because
it is
we would have had to hire another
Exactly.
position at the middle school if
That's
we
right.
didn't do this.
Now we're only hiring one outside, or one additional. We have 2 openings, but we're filling one internally. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
And does this give us access then to another science, at least another science class?
Yes, it does. Yep. Because one of the ILT, Carrie Giantazio is the ILT teacher, and she'll be going back to the classroom for another block. So there'll be an additional science class that can be taught.
How much larger is the incoming 9th grade than the current class sizes? It's quite a bit, right?
Yes, there's an adjustment. We look at the total adjustment from the school. I can't give you the number right
Yeah,
now.
no, that's
I
fine.
can give it
No,
to you.
because I think we also saw that not as many kids have reported that they're going out of district. You know, you will see that from 8th to 9th grade, and there's a lot more kids that we've heard are continuing to stay, which is great. But
but the overall high school enrollment next year, it's going up a few students, but it's not, when we look at the class sizes with those numbers, it still wasn't much of there wasn't much of a movement there.
Okay.
With the number of courses and offerings that we have. And I will say that, you know, one of the things that happens sometimes is that we just don't offer as many electives. When we're doing that, we have 4 courses. We have a lot more electives today than we used to, which was a huge push for us to do that. But that is something that happens, you know, if you don't have enough staffing. We also have courses that don't fill. We'll have kids sign up, and there's just not enough students, so we won't run that course. So we look at all those things right as well.
Within our finance, we had a pretty substantial conversation about the portables and conversations about options, and it was the following day or a few days later after we had our board meeting. Can we have like that out loud conversation to express so that we can all understand? We were talking about shifting, and could we not do them and have teachers do some movement, and how that could work.
So yes, that's a great conversation the Finance Committee had, and we talked it through there. Prior to that, we started talking about this back in the fall. We talked to the administrators at the middle school, all 3 of them. 4, 5, and 6, 8 to try to get a sense of capacity and can we do it a different way. We even started looking at the Mabel Wilson School. Was there anything in the modular capacity that we could actually have a classroom over there in order to look at this? And so we looked at all the angles. Originally, the board, back when the referendum failed, I think it was, 2023, the board approved a short-term facilities plan, which in this summer, we would have added a 12-room unit in order to go forward at the middle school. Obviously, we're not going to do that because the bond did pass, a year ago, and as a result of that, we're trying to make do with everything we've got right now. But at a minimum, we need to add 2 rooms to get through the next school year. And we also forecast that we need 2 more rooms a year from now in order to get through that last year before the new school opens. We're going to be looking at that last 2 room again, just like we thoroughly looked at it this year. But we need to have the 2 rooms at the middle school. That's just the bottom line. Part of the expense that we've been talking about at the middle school is also the 3 units that are at the middle school right now have some substantial HVAC concerns. These are the same rooms, I think all 6 of them, that were at Wilson years ago. We moved them over to the middle school, which was a concern of people at the time. We've tried to make it through, but those HVAC issues are getting worse. And Scott can actually speak to that. So some of that $150,000 lease is to replace the 3. And Scott worked with Schiavi to get a fairly good deal with Schiavi to make that happen. But that includes the 2 new rooms and replacing the 3 units, which is 6 rooms that we have right now. The HVAC is really on its last leg. We're not going to get through the next 2 years with those. They're old. Do you want to add detail?
No, I think that took care of it.
The other, so I'd like to reduce some of the electives with the smaller class sizes at the high school. I'm looking for any possible way that we can save any possible money. I've had a lot of people just reach out with big concerns about this, the tax increase. And I know we've looked at it. I know we don't have a lot of room for movement between salaries, beyond salaries. There's just not a lot of wiggle room, but we need to find more.
Well, with 82% of the budget being staffing, there's only really one place to go. It's not going to be widgets.
Yeah, so, and is this something you guys talked about too in finance? Just like what that would look like, so that would have to be a reduction in staff, right?
I don't know if it would be a reduction in staff as much as making sure that classes were used more fully, so that there were, more than 6 kids in a class. That's an elective.
Do you mean at the high school, Sarah? Are you talking about like?
At the high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we would be talking about staffing, but I don't think, most of our electives are quite a bit bigger than that. It's some of the upper level courses that we have, like
the AP, IB.
Yeah, IB diploma, AP courses, and we try not to duplicate. So if we offer something in AP, we don't offer it in IB. So kids only have access to one, and they can take courses between the 2 to do that, as you know. But so I don't think I think the electives, we don't run electives.
I have no
idea
idea where it is that we can find money. Is it
arts? People always love to cut the arts. I mean, I'm saying it's
I
like
want to cut the
people
arts. I'm just
take. I don't want to cut the arts either, but like, do we not want kids to learn art or music or foreign languages? I mean, places you can cut, but like, I don't have an appetite to say I want to do it.
Speaking to the student perspective also, I'd say that people get really excited about our vast options for electives. And I know like Sophia and I are both in the diploma program for IB, so we don't get a ton of options for electives because our schedules are pretty set in stone. So we try to take them in the first 2 years. And kids get so excited about like the opportunity to take ceramics or just like any of the like performing arts, like just it really gets kids excited. But I also like, do we have any electives that kids really don't utilize that would change anything financially?
So the high school each year, there might be, usually I'm aware of 1 or 2 electives at least that get put into the schedule, but there's not enough students. And usually 10 is our like minimum, bare minimum. Most electives have well over that for electives because they are popular. But we won't run a course. We just don't run it. The high school won't run the course. Okay. And they'll reassign that teacher to another course, another core course.
I'm also like, just to add on, 80% sure, so not that sure, but like the only class that's really under 10% that, or under 10 students that gets, you know, that we have to carry is IB biology, and that's just because of the IB program. But I mean, we had to cut AP bio because there were 4 kids taking it, and as Mr. Porter said, electives, they really don't get run if there aren't enough students taking them. So
but what I hear from, I think, Sarah is, Sarah's line of work would indicate that she would never want to cut from an academic side of things. But there are really hard decisions we have to make. And it's like, I'd rather be like, I'm going to cut that bus. Like, we're just not going to go to Rangeley at the middle of the night, or that van. And we're like, than academic. But there's a lot of things there's like, oh, we need to have. And we've done a lot of that work that I don't think people see. For example, like in our renovation of the new school, or Mabel I. Wilson, like, being like, if we do this, then we have to have another staff member, or we talk about that. Like, we do cuts that you will never see on this paper, but we like the hard to have conversations of maybe for a little while we can't do these things. We can't get a new van. I'm just focusing on the van unnecessarily. I'm sure that van is fine. I'm sure you're totally right about that. I'm sure you're totally right about that. But I see where Sarah's trying to go. Like, I feel like it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're not at the number that you want to get to and the percentage of you want to get to, and we're having like a hard time with that. And so I get that. Like, you know, I get that. And where can we cut? We're just going to have to get uncomfortable in a little bit. I don't think cutting electives are necessarily something that I would be for, because I think we should put a focus on academics, which I think majority of it has been staff and all that. But I do see some things where it's like, oh, nice to have. And then I just promoted wireless access points, so I'll shut up. But like, yeah,
and that's what I was trying to understand too. Like, so when we say cut electives, like, what, does that mean that you can move somebody to be doing something else? Mm-hmm. And I think elective is a misnomer. Keep in mind that all STEM classes are electives, right?
Right, and also students have to have a certain number of electives. They have to have a certain number of credits, and you can't get them just from core courses. So students have to take electives, and they also have to take courses in certain areas. So those, you know, in order to graduate, so in order to meet the graduation requirements.
And I have an idea, and this isn't for this level, but because this is a state requirement, the gym requirement, I do love gym. This is nothing against gym teachers. We value our sports, but gym is a requirement, especially for our athletes. I would love to see maybe a policy change there, because then we can maybe shift that around too. But
well, I will speak for the high school PE program.
Nothing against the PE
Greeley
program.
Chair hates JID.
So we have 2 PE teachers at the high school, but one of the reasons is that we used to offer a summer PE program for high school students in order to get their credits. We eliminated that. That actually was fairly expensive, because we would have a group of 25 students every summer that took it, because they couldn't take it or didn't want to take it during the school year.
And it was
so it was additional cost, and nobody really liked it. It was too hot. And so we got rid of that. Was an expense we got rid of. And we invested in our PE program, which we have an outstanding PE program at the high school, at all of our schools. But
yes, and this is nothing against the PE program. I think people who haven't even taken the PE program just dread.
I'm taking all the electives. You're taking the van.
Or that they want to access the other electives, especially for our athletes, right? And then to take gym.
And when I say electives too, I probably, both of you can probably correct me on this a little bit. We say electives. Electives are beyond the core courses, but again, there's electives that aren't really, I mean, you could say world language is an elective. No, you have to have world language to graduate. But if you take, for example, you want to continue, that becomes an elective because it's a course that you choose to. It's beyond the requirements. But I will say for students in our community, and I would say for really all students, you can't just go 2 years and learn a world language, for example. If you really want to learn the language, you've got to go all 4 years. And we have a lot of students that come in with level 1 done from middle school, and then they progress and become really proficient in language. So I say that's an elective, but it really isn't. For most students, that's kind of like I got to do this in order to get into a college that I want to get into. Yeah. So I don't know if I'm saying that eloquently.
No,
but
definitely. And like just to reiterate that, you have 2 years of required. Is it 2 years, or is it 2 credits?
It's 2 or 3. It's 2.
I think it's 2. Yeah. So you only have to take 2 years of your foreign language class, and then you don't necessarily have to take it your junior and senior year. But I think I know of maybe 2 people who have done that. But you really need it. Like there's no way you're going to become fluent from your 2 years of middle school or 3 years of middle school, and then this when you're only covering 1 level in middle school. But like that being considered an elective, yeah, I consider it a core class.
Right, because I put it is technically an elective, but it really is. For most students, it's like a must. And if you want to go to college, you got to have that. You know, if you want to go to college of your choice, you've got to have those 3 or 4 years. They look for that. So those are things that I think are nuances in the way we look at electives. But.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. So Tim, I want to go back to your question because I think it was a really good one. And I'll kind of let you, or I'll turn this back to you for a moment. How detailed would you like me to get about how in depth I went? Like,
no,
how much do you want me to share?
No, because that would be like, I trust that committee did, and like it sounds like you guys have done due diligence. I just know like when I come to the meeting from a position of chair or in a committee, I'm like, oh, they're totally going to ask about this. And this is a very heavy document. So I just want to know, like, is there something that you guys want us to know? Like, you had a big conversation about the portables. That's really important for us to know because that checks box. We talked about that at the end. So, like, that I really appreciate. So is there anything else that for the community that's here, that's hearing that, like, a lot of stuff happened behind closed doors, anything you want to bring our attention to of, like, you might see this later on when you read this at 12 o'clock at night over your cereal, and this is the conversation that we had at this point. Like, I just want to provide that opportunity for that group to be like, what am I missing here? Because I must be missing something. You guys have had a lot of back and forth conversations. Yeah. So is there anything? And you did it.
Yeah, so I will go then a little bit beyond that because this is more my personal analysis because, and we'll just take a step back here, everyone at this table, with the exception of Scott and Jeff, either is or represents a taxpayer, right? So I need to know, not just as the finance chair, but as a taxpayer, whether or not I am okay with this budget, because I also have to go home and get into bed with a taxpayer who really is going to grill me about this. So I decided to come at it from a slightly different perspective, which is I kind of broke up this budget. I mean, there's no way around it because of the way we're required to do it, but I hate the setup of this budget because it doesn't line up with cost centers and it's just hard to wrap your head around. So I literally went through line by line, broke it up into 3 categories of what are fixed numbers that are mandatory. Their contracts, their debts that are encumbered, we cannot get around that. And then our best estimates, they're still mandatory, but maybe it's not a contract. So legal, utilities, gas, fuel, things that the special ed placements, out of district placements, those two categories of things that, at least in my opinion, we cannot get around, came to almost 95% of this budget.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, so we could talk about cutting positions. We could talk about, maybe like how to get around the enrollment issues and the kids who show up at our district. In my opinion, none of that is negotiable.
So the portables, for instance, would be in that 95%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is,
Where's that
again,
van?
my analysis. I'm going to say that again. This is, to me, right? I know that a van is going to be a mandatory cost because we can't safely drive around in a van that's rusting out. So yes, I put a van into a controlled or a mandatory cost. So that left me with less than $3,000 in costs that we could control, meaning we could play with. I don't like the word discretionary because that implies a want, not a need, but you could call it that. Of that 8 million in costs that we could technically play with. 40% of that is technology. And so this is where I started to really get into areas, because when I'm looking at a budget, words I don't like are miscellaneous. I don't like supplies. I don't like anything where, okay, what is actually in that line item? And so that was one thing, to kind of get back to your question, where I really grilled Scott. Okay, what is in supplies? What is in software, hardware? And he was able to answer everything to my satisfaction. But the software or technology line, like I said, is 40% of what we could control, but that is curriculum, that is Meraki, that is the switches, that is the bus.
Zonar.
Thank you,
GPS.
Zonar. I don't know why, I can never remember that.
Such a memorable name.
Yeah. So I don't even know that I would keep that in that, kind of soft cost. But technically we could play with that, okay? Then there's instructional supplies and books, which we've talked about, the reading program. That's a huge piece of that 2.8 million. Books represent 5% of that cost that, in my opinion, we could play with. Athletics, I put in there. I put, there's a line, because this was another one that made me nervous or uncomfortable. Greeley, the high school, has a line you'll notice under supplies that is miscellaneous. So that's a yellow flag to me. $110,000. Well, guess what? That includes all IB costs, AP costs, graduation. Scott, remind me, what else? AP, IB, graduation.
NEAS, our accreditation.
Yes, accreditations.
Graduation costs us a lot, right?
It does.
Costs a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll put
In
that
order to
on.
put on a party like that, you have to pay for it, and there's certain things that people want.
Okay.
Graduation is
Don't feel too bad, Sophie. It's not your fault.
I believe graduation is around 33,000.
Yeah.
That number.
So again, that's a want. I don't know, but it's part of that money that maybe isn't a fixed or encumbered cost. And then a portion of professional development is in that as well, not the part that is part of the teacher's contract. So,
like the equity contractor would probably fall
Or
under.
like
well, he's gone. That's gone.
Do you mean like
well, no, we got that down.
administrative?
We still pay.
So contracted services are included
okay.
in that line.
In that line,
But then, professional development that is not considered contracted or under the teacher's contract.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Kim is happy to share her work.
I am
No,
so
I
happy to share it
I would love to see
because I spent so many hours when I could have been getting caught up on Game of Thrones or something, but because I've never watched it.
That's the one more complicated thing than this.
Yeah,
but,
that's right. So it's not perfect. Like it didn't add up perfectly, but I got it to be within $500. So I was pretty dang proud of myself. So I say all this because I can look at this line of $2.8 million and say, there's really no room to play with even that $2.8 million.
Without sacrificing safety or educational, that's what you're saying, okay.
Or staff satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
Didn't personal development factor heavily into feedback from teachers?
Yeah. I mean, could teachers teach without technology, and could students have a pen or a pencil and some paper? Technically, yeah, they could. Would they be ready for a 21st century college experience? They would
These
not.
people still want to do
That is-
geometry in a workbook. We did that 20 years ago, but that's cool.
Can I just add something about technology, is also to remind people that our high school students do not get a district issued laptop unless they do not have one from home, which we have maybe 80 or 90 students that partake in that, but it's BYOLD, which is also a cost reducer in previous boards, and have gone with that approach at the high school. But we don't issue them at the high school level.
Kim, I would love to see that, and that's a really great breakdown, so I appreciate you.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, this was for my own satisfaction. It was just the way that I wanted to think about it. But if it helps somebody else.
Kim, I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
a huge portion of this is raises for teachers because we have been underpaying our teachers relative to all the schools around us, and we are now catching up, right? So we've been getting away with underpaying our teachers in an incredible school district. Do you know what portion of, so we're also hiring some new teachers. Yeah, do you know what portion of the increases is the raises? And those are going to continue for 2 more years, right? Like over 3 years that we're
This
getting
is
raises?
the big year when the teachers really get caught up. I don't know the answer to that.
The aggregate is just under 8%, the aggregate for raises for this coming FY26.
Yeah, because it's a big pill to swallow, but also to know that we've been underpaying our teachers relative to our neighbors, and they could go elsewhere, and they maybe have been staying because we have time for them to prep classes, and that a lot of them haven't jumped ship. I'm thankful for, but also I think if we're not competitive with the schools around us, then we're going to lose the best teachers, and maybe that saves us money and we get fresh teachers who cost less, but that's a road I don't know that we want to go down.
Don't forget our ed techs, teachers and ed techs.
Costs go up because we have to pay these people competitive wages. And
so the increase for the teacher contract was just under 8% for next year and 7% the year after, and that equates to about 3.3% of the overall budget increase.
Yeah, so it's just like
so of the 7.2%, about 3.3 of that is salary increases for the contract.
Do we want to continue with the tax assessment? More questions for Kim?
I have just one more question. Is that okay? I'm sorry. I noticed that. Can you talk about the special ed substitute lines a little bit? There's been a pretty big increase, I'll say, over the last couple of years, and just that substitute line, like, it's not a big increase from last year, but if you look at 2 years ago, can you just kind of speak just a little bit to that? 'Cause
Sure.
At a 0% increase from year to year, that's good, but it was a huge before that. So there must be something there that I'm missing.
There is,
So
yeah.
I'm sorry, Leanne, I know we need to get to taxes.
No, it's
Tim,
fine.
which page and which line?
78 and 497. So there are 2 lines that I was looking at in particular. There could be another one. I'm very interested in making sure. Yeah.
So the answer to that is that substitutes used to be charged to the regular instruction lines.
Yeah.
And as substitute time has increased in the district, we've allocated the appropriate amount to special ed that was normally charged over to regular instruction.
Okay.
So that's the difference.
Okay.
Okay, it's just an allocation issue.
Okay. It's just a shift.
It's a shift.
It's a shift. Okay.
So you're seeing
That
less.
just
of
looked like an
So you're
anomaly.
not seeing an increase in the regular instruction lines because we've actually increased the special ed lines.
Okay.
With the appropriate substitute lines.
Okay. I'm out. Because that's, yeah, it's good.
Okay. So, I don't know, where do we go from here? You want me to keep going?
So I think we have a small group of attendees, if they might have some questions about some of the, I think if the questions are specific to what we've covered, we might be open to a few questions.
You gotta go to the
I think
podium.
if for our viewers at home.
Posterity.
Shirley Story King, Cumberland, and I first want to thank Kim for all the time she's given me, and Sarah and Sean. I've sat in on a couple of finance meetings. One of my issues, and Scott knows this issue too, and he's working on it, but one of my issues is you're building a budget for next year based on last year's budget, not knowing what you've spent this year. So for example, last year you spent $700,000 less in Cost Center 1 than you budgeted for. But when you get down to the bottom line, because of transfers and all of fund balance transfers and all of that, it looks like $500,000 not. And the year before it was close to it was over $900,000 there. That I really wish that we could build next year's budget with a more accurate picture of what we're actually spending this year. And Tim's question was exactly, that. When you're looking at your budget, you shouldn't be looking at just last year's proposed or approved budget. You should be looking at the year before to see what you actually spent in that category. So special ed substitutes, 3 different lines, it totals over $42,000 difference from 2 years ago to this year. That's like a teacher's salary or an ed tech salary. So Scott explained it, that you moved it from regular ed to special ed, but did you look at whether that was reflected in the regular ed substitute line? So that's the level of detail, and I guess it comes from my experience of going through line by line. And we actually at the town do 3 years, look back 3 years and look at the history of 3 years, line by line by line, but that information's not always available to you all. And Scott is working on it. I know he is. We've had several conversations. He did have first quarter financials, which are a great tool. Even quarterly financials. Are we on track? Are we on track in this category? Are we way over in legal? That's one of the categories Cumberland goes over. Why are you over in legal? Why are you under in legal? So why are you over in recreation or under in recreation? Well, that's because they all signed up in June, but or May or April for recreational programs, but they don't start until school gets out. So you need to be able to look at that over time. And I know your administration does, but I'm asking the board to do that too.
Thank you, Shirley. I know we're excited about the new accounting software too, that is going to make some things easier on us.
It's taken a tremendous amount of work to get that implemented, so
yeah,
it's going to provide us with a lot of opportunities, and our biggest start of that whole process was ensuring everybody got paid, staff contracts and retroactive pay got done, so we'll eventually have the report structure set as well. So
yeah, very, very excited to
we can
have
deal
that.
with a lot of things in the organization, but not people not getting paid.
Right.
Okay. I
That's
can deal with anything
always,
else but that.
I appreciate
okay?
that's always the first
All right,
priority.
So that's the first priority.
So is there other questions that are specific about the budget that's being shared tonight? Yeah, I think we need you to. And yeah, and as everyone knows, and I think we've said, please always feel free to reach out to the board finance chair, anybody on the board, if you have specific questions. Happy, I know many of us have met with many individuals and are, always happy to sit down with people and answer questions via email, in person. So just want to make sure people know they have opportunities.
Sure. I'm Dave McLaughlin. I'm a resident of North Yarmouth. I met with the board before a couple of years ago. Bottom line on it is, when you look over the next 5 years, the tax impact is 60%, and that's climbing. I bet you it's going to be closer to 70 to 80%. I think that's beyond the affordability of the residents of this community, and I think at some point the operating budget is going to be tested hard. When you look at a 7.23% increase, that's accelerating. The year before it was 6.8, the year before, that's 3 times inflation. You can't sustain that. So to me, the one thing that came to mind, and when I looked at the referendum 2 years ago, and I figured I'll take 10 minutes, that's all I need. What's a tax impact? Couldn't find it. But the big thing was, how do we compare to other schools? And I think that's what's missing in this budgeting process, that I think if you did it, it would be a huge help. You're doing this in silos. You're comparing ourselves to ourselves a year before. You ought to have a column in there comparing ourselves to all the schools across the state. I did that a little bit. I look at transportation and facility management here, and it's 8.4 million. I look at our peers, and they're 4 million. Why are we running twice as much? That could be a category item. And it may be in the end that when you do a peer analysis, any way you cut it, we're going to be a high-cost school, because we are. It may be that it's justified because we're a high-benefit school, but I think you really should go down through this exercise of doing a peer analysis. The private sector does it. I come from the banking industry. We always compare to peers within the industry. Did it with schools. I financed private schools. I don't see that here. And I think it's the highest cost per student operation in the state, assuming the new school. I believe that's correct. I think it warrants taking a look at that. Kim, you're absolutely right. It's tough. When you look at the operations of the teachers, I'm not talking about the teachers. You got to keep the teachers. I'd rather we be in teepees and keep the teachers, to be honest with you. You got to keep the teachers and have good education. I think you got opportunities elsewhere to save some money. And if you go through the exercise of doing a peer analysis, that exercise will clearly show you where our costs, on a per cost basis, there's 11 cost centers, where do we compare to our peers? And if we're high, there's your opportunity. And teacher-wise, you just got to remain competitive in the marketplace. I'm not going to speak on that point. Obviously, the teachers are critical. That's it.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
And I know that we've done quite a bit of work on comparison to peers.
I think it's coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna.
Yeah, we
I was
haven't
like
gotten
doing
there yet.
finish and then, but people.
It's coming.
It's fine that I don't mind that you're talking here. Just anybody at home doesn't know what's going on.
Can I just add that if you do, anyone out there has ideas in this to save money, and throw them out, like throw them out to us and be like,
Please
sure, I'll take a
email,
look at that.
come to public comment, always receptive and open, because this is important. We are all taxpayers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've done some comparisons around facilities and transportation. So like the facilities comparison, you know, we have modulars over 700,000. We have projects such as the energy project on Mabel R. Wilson School, which was subsidized. We also have school revolving renovation fund projects over there as well. So all of those things just by themselves are like $1.2 million. So when you start looking at a comparison to comparison, it's like you said, you really have to dig deeper into the cost centers and figure out what's in there versus what's in another district, because I can tell you the districts around us don't have those same things that are in their budgets. Transportation as well. One of the things about this community, you try to reduce a level of service, and it doesn't go well. So people have a high expectation. Okay, so we have, you know, buses that are running and trying to keep under an hour. We have student pickups that are relatively door to door. And we run 3 to 4 activity buses in the evening. It's a level of service that our community has demanded. And when we've tried to reduce in those areas, we take an incredible amount of feedback on that. So I would share that as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Just comparison-wise, if you look at last year's documentation, there was a district budget meeting presentation 5/9/24, and there's a couple slides in there that give you very exactly what you're asking for: regional comparison, raw and adjusted per pupil cohort comparison between several different school districts, just for something to review.
We're doing that right now. We'll have that information available in April as well. We do that every year.
It'll help you big time.
Yeah.
Keeping the public art.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well said.
Do we want to finish? Was there any other specific questions about the budget items? We'll go to the tax assessment. Thank you.
All right. So before we get into the tax assessment, though, one of the things that I wanted to share was that this is a working budget right now. This is not the end of the line on the budget. Even in our office right now, what we're doing is we're still going line by line, checking every salary line, every benefit line of the budget. So, and then also with finance, we'll be doing some of that work as well. So it is a working budget until it's adopted by the board to go to our district budget meeting. It's still live. Okay,
and to Shirley's point, I presume you're also in real time actual cost
Absolutely.
for this
absolutely.
current budget and last
Absolutely.
year.
Yep. Yeah, and as I said, it's been a number to get our arms around. We've done it in the past, but it's a number to get our arms around right now.
And health insurance comes out in April.
Health insurance comes out in
That's a
April,
big
so
one.
no, is it a 10%? Is it 15%, or is it 5%? I just don't know. I'm going to guess by our experience rating, it's not going to be 5. Okay, so but we'll see how that goes. But we'll have a better idea of that number. So, okay, so taxes. So this is the tax assessment to the two communities, and the way in which taxes are assessed or the assessment is calculated is there's a certain cost-sharing formula that you have with the state of Maine. And that's the first area, and that's called your required local, or your 6.1 mil. That has nothing to do in the way in which it's shared between the two communities. That's how your cost sharing is a community with the state of Maine. And then the additional local is what's shared between the two communities, and it's based on property valuation. As you can see, Cumberland is 72.76% of the property valuation of the two communities, and North Yarmouth is 27.24. Obviously, North Yarmouth is a smaller community than Cumberland with a lower tax base. So that's why they pay 27.24% of the share. So if you look at the difference between 24-25 and 25-26, the increase to Cumberland is about 1.8 million, and the increase to North Yarmouth is about 486,000. And the difference between the two on the mill rate is $1.24 in Cumberland and 80 cents in North Yarmouth, a 5% and a 4% respectively. These numbers do not count any new property valuation. They're based on the current year's property valuation. There will be growth in both communities that will offset these numbers. And those come out a little bit later, and we get that information from the town managers as we get closer to the budget meeting. So we should have more accurate numbers by then. This is purely based on current property valuation. So that would be the tax assessment, and that's how it's calculated. So what that means in layman's terms is if you're in North Yarmouth, you'll spend $80 for every $100,000 of your property tax assessment. So not your market value of your house. All right, if you think you can get $800,000 for it and it's valued at $500,000, your taxes are based on $500,000. Okay, so it'd be $80 for every $100,000 of value, and so you can pretty much extrapolate from your tax bill what your taxes would be on your home. In Cumberland, it's $124 on $100,000. So you can pretty much figure out what your valuation is there as well. And again, I fully expect that those numbers will decrease based on the valuation increases in both communities. Okay. That's it. I think we had some questions. So any more?
Thank you. Yeah, and you said usually we'll find out in late April from the
we
towns?
usually find out as we get closer to, the health insurance usually comes out right around April, beginning of April is we're starting to look to, around that time frame. As far as the valuation numbers, we get closer to that as we get closer to the budget meeting.
Does the board have questions about the tax assessment information? I think Shirley might have a question.
I know. I hate to burst your bubble because those look like great numbers. They don't look that bad. 5% and 4% do not look bad. But if you look at the last 3 years, I don't think you're going to get a handle on your budgets until you really look at what you spend your money on. And over the last 3 years, you've increased the budget. If this one, unless you bring it down a little, it's increased over $11 million, which is a 25 point, I figured it out, like a 25.6% increase in spending. So there might be increased revenues to offset that, but I know the state and every municipality and every school district in the state is looking at what I knew probably years ago as the fiscal year 26 cliff, where we're all falling off because revenues have faded or disappeared, or people have allocated funds for infrastructure and instead of using it for infrastructure, they've used it for salaries, and now they don't have the money to pay for salaries because it should have gone. I know that we do a great job. I know Scott does a great job. He and I have been frequent. I've had meetings with Scott many times over the years, and
26 years.
So
28.
I just want you to keep that in perspective. 4% and 5% increases in the mill rate don't sound like a lot, but you've increased spending $11 million in 3 years. So it's another way to look at it.
Yeah, and I know probably at the next time this presented, we have a lot of other charts that compare increases in enrollment, the percentage of this that goes to the teacher salary. Like, yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure this resonates with other board members. Like, yes, you add it up over a number of years. It is a lot of money. I also know, as an employer myself, that I've also, I mean, it's a lot of it's salaries and the cost of living, and that's what we're seeing in our budget.
And I did that too.
Yeah.
To the extent that I could, but I went through RSU 14, 15, 5, Falmouth, Yarmouth, Scarborough, and Westbrook, and all in the high 20s to low 30s increase, and we're not the highest. So I don't have complete numbers because some budgets aren't available online as far back as 2019, and some budgets were not available for 2026 yet. So it's not perfect. Jeff is working on that to show us what the comparisons are for not just this year's increases, but historical increases, because I think that's really important. And it's not like just because everybody's doing it makes it okay, but it made me feel at least more comfortable about the budget, knowing that every district has had a comparable increase. And when I think of it in terms of percentage wise rather than dollar amounts, because no district is apples to apples. No district is a perfect comparison when you think about the commercial tax base, or is it a district instead of a municipal budget? So
one of the big differences, though, is like some of our comparison towns have a lot of businesses that share that like tax burden.
Well, and that's why I was just saying,
yeah.
if you go by the percent increase in the budget, that's not
right. But I feel like in our circumstances, like where I've changed some of my position on certain development, like in our circumstance, every additional thing hurts just that much more. Like we don't have something else to kind of like filter out of like, oh, we're sharing it. It's like, no, we're primarily the responsible ones for paying the increases that we have here. So every single added thing. But at the same time, like enrollment's going up, and this is, I honestly can't see a lot of spots to cut. And so I think it's that much more painful in part because of this unique situation of the lack of businesses in our towns and the enrollment increases.
Well, and that's one thing that we've been talking about that I think is getting added to some of the data, because we're saying, oh, we're comparable or we're somewhere in the middle of these increases. What those other districts haven't had is the enrollment increase.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got, their budgets have gone up just as much, if not more, and they've had stagnant or decreasing enrollment.
And less subsidy.
And less subsidy, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a good piece of information.
Doesn't make it better. It's just what it is.
I know it does feel like more of a conversation if you can sit there and ask, but.
Bill Young, Hedgerow. So my thing is TIFs and valuation. That's kind of what my thing is. And so Scott, I guess I run this by you, and I know you guys were surprised by the, a couple of the developments that go in. We're going to get hit with 100 to 200 houses in the next couple of years, maybe. And so based on the valuations, like the West Cumberland one, that's going to be like 70 houses. I think that's in the TIF zone, don't know for sure. But how is, when you talk about valuations, if we show, I just want to clear this up, if we're going to show more valuation, then we're going to get less from the state. Is that right?
Yes, but it's not necessarily a direct correlation, right? But yes, valuation is one of the factors in the state funding formula. In a lot of states, the school district gets to participate in the TIFs that are done in the communities. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen in the state of Maine, but that's one of the things that.
So if we get, if just take for instance the West Cumberland one,
mm-hmm.
if that is TIF, then all those houses, all those kids that are going to be in those houses, everybody else is going to be paying for those kids, and so it doesn't go, that money isn't going to go to the general fund, and so that makes it worse for the district in a lot of ways.
I think it's more complicated than that, Bill.
Well, I'm sure it is.
It's a further conversation than just tonight. Yep. You don't necessarily receive a ton of state subsidy because you sheltered money in a TIF district, okay? Obviously, if you have to build infrastructure for the number of students that are coming in, or you have to hire more staff, well, those costs are certainly going to exceed whatever you might shelter, is what I think.
I'm just looking down the road too.
So that's what I believe.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
Well, I think that is a good point, though, because years ago, a few years ago, the board asked very specific questions about TIFing in both towns, and what the impact was on the schools, and being able to collect taxes and all of that. And there's pros and cons for TIFing, related to schools. I'll only speak to schools. In the town of Cumberland, the former town manager did a calculation for us, and over a 10-year period, and I'd have to go back and check my math, check my notes, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 11 million in revenue that didn't come to the schools because of tiffing and tax sheltered things. And it was a very eye-opening calculation and exercise that the board went through at that point. And I was surprised at how large the amount was of.
But also, I'm sorry, but.
No, I was just going to say this is a really good conversation. I know we canceled our joint meeting in February, and it looks like we're trying to settle on a date in May. And I know this conversation is bigger than any particular year, and so this could be a good focus of our May meeting. I know we wanted to talk about shared services in general, just so we can continue to find opportunities, which we do. Even though we didn't have that meeting in February, doesn't mean that we haven't been talking about shared services, but also just better understanding, what's upcoming, what's the plan, is it TIF, is it not TIF, what's the impact. I think that would be a great joint conversation.
Yeah, the TIF is actually, I look at the tax rate town, school, county. Right? I don't look at it just school or just town or county. So when you look at a TIF, it actually is a great mechanism for a community to set money aside and be able to use it for infrastructure items. I mean, it's a great tool to do that. So in the long run, it probably does save some funds. So,
but not for us.
Not necessarily. Depends, right, on what the infrastructure is that it's used for.
Yeah, because I'm curious I know that it's complicated, the reasons that Cumberland has the 5% versus North Yarmouth the 4%, but I don't know how much TIF plays into that or not.
That's just one community growing faster than the other in terms of the kind of percentages. The value. And it's just, the sharing of the mill rate with the state and the sharing between the two communities.
Can I ask a weird question in terms of to offset these increases? Is there any way we could think about ways we can increase revenue? For example, I know there was a big fight about affordable housing a little while back, and it came to light that the town forest was gifted for the sole benefit of the schools. And, Denny was a school board member, pointed that out vigorously. So there's a sort of forest there. It's, it's full of invasives that we've been grinding out, but there's a huge piece of land that somebody set aside and said it was for the benefit of the schools. As Drummond Woodson, have we ever asked, can we actually do that? Can we put an office park there and have the revenue go towards offsetting the school? Or, are there other opportunities as a school district where we can, and I know it's complicated and it used to be a municipal school and that's why the town has control over it now and maybe they wouldn't give it up, but maybe we can talk about that
I won't
joint
focus
meeting.
on that land piece, but I think your point around are there additional revenue opportunities is a good one. I'm not going to touch the forest personally.
There are statutory limitations to what a district can do for rentals and building office buildings and things. It really has to be for school purpose. So.
But I know we are as
That's
a district.
Well,
I was just going to say I know that we're going to use it and benefit from it, but I know we would also like to be able to offer it to rent, and so that that would be increase in revenue that we should think about what our goals for that revenue is.
We rent the pool, we rent the GCA, we rent rooms in the buildings at times and stuff, so absolutely.
And I did see that went up.
It did.
So we could set, that would be a good conversation. What's our goal for next year and how can we achieve that?
We're renting to the GCA is rented to MYA, it's rented to other outside organizations and piano recitals for others who are wanting to rent the space, so it is used and it is rented.
So we should continue to look for revenue opportunities. Other questions?
I have an answer to Megan's question. I found the information, and unfortunately, it's not better than what I thought. So, but it's a 5-year contract for Strategics Crisis Alert. 30,000 is inclusive of cutting those setup costs and flattening it for 5 years. So it is 30,000 each year.
Okay, thanks.
Just to give you an answer.
All right. Well, the presentation is down, so I guess. Oh, it's back up. I guess we're not done.
There we go. See if I can get out. In the technology, that Kim was talking about, the finance committee did ask, and we did put it out tonight. Just how is educational technology used in our district from pre-K through 12, and also the approximate amount of time that students are on that technology, so the board has that information.
Any other questions? I would just like to express my gratitude for the countless hours and tedious work that it's taken to go through this at the administrative offices from our finance committee. You can tell how deeply we care about our community through the diligent work that goes into both understanding, you know, where the dollars are going to support our students, but also to recognize the cost to our community to do so, and how important the questions are from the community, ideas, you know, we so appreciate it. Help keeps us all accountable. So thank you.
I attended this workshop before I was on the board a couple years ago, and I was the only one there, and it's really nice to see like a lot of people engaged and with it. I think we all value from it, so it's nice to see the change.
Mm-hmm.
And just to remind everybody that the board adopts the budget, or chooses to adopt the budget on April 17th. There's also a public hearing that evening prior to adoption.
April 17th.
April 17th,
April
and then the May 8th meeting is in the GCA. And that is where the district budget meeting where we do vote as a community on the budget before it goes to ballot. Sophia, are you 18 yet?
No.
Oh, okay. And you won't be during this school year? No.
Well, May, but.
Okay.
So you.
Oh, sorry, guys.
So in June.
June, you get to vote for it.
Well, I'll vote.
Okay.
You better believe I'll vote.
I know that you're probably going to ask this question, but if there, if there is something that we need to know, administration needs to know about the budget tonight, going forward, we only have a short period of time to get that budget prepared. And I know we would work through the finance committee, but we do need to know if we're either headed in the right direction or not, in terms of the work on the back end, just for our knowledge.
Thank you. Great. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second for Jesse. All in favor? Great. It's unanimous. Thanks, everyone. And I know Christina wishes she could be here.
Yeah.